When we come into a congregation and decide it's our own, as you all did at one time or another, we invest deep hopes and desires. Together we create and hold a vision of what is in the present and what will be in years to come, what will be the legacy. Participation in a faith community touches every part of our lives. Up here last Sunday, I talked about while we can and should explore life's deeper meanings as individuals, it's together here in sharing those perspectives that we gain even greater discernment and perspective. It's when we're together that we explore what it truly means to be human, fully human. Those moments of loud or soft epiphanies when we recognize our wholeness and its relationship to the cosmos and one another. Our faith home also hopefully becomes a place of comfort, celebration, solace, and for me it adds some predictability in my week. I like to know I'm always anchored by Sunday morning. And as we've come out of Omicron and are still in Omicron, we're hoping for equilibrium. This is a place where we minister to one another as we still try to find that equilibrium of the retirement of Reverend Duffy. This morning, I want to talk about how we're going to approach these things together, how we're going to look at these questions in our next year. Now, let me start with saying there's a lot of sagely advice from the Unitarian Universalist Association. Our association of churches and those wise people, mostly back east. And these transitions, they know and we know, are painful and they increase anxiety, but it's a normal part of congregational life. I actually come from a fellowship in Washington State that has gone back and forth between 150 and 200 members. We're a Navy community, so families move in and out a great deal. I served on the board different times, 8 out of those 25 years there. In that time, we had 3 called ministers, we had an interim, and we had a developmental minister. So that was a lot of change. So I know what ministerial changes feel like from sitting in your seats from before I was a minister. Uncertainty, grief, and a whole lot of work are the words that come to my mind immediately. During all of that change, I read a book by John Weston, who is the former transition director at the Unitarian Universalist Association. With his sagely advice, he says very plainly, when radical change is forced upon a congregation, often by the departure of a minister, the task is simple to name. It is to accept the change and move on to embrace the opportunities that change allows. But then he adds, this is more easily said than done. End of quote. All sounds a little dry to me. So while I agree with the message, what I notice immediately is there is no naming of grief. So our first task together is to create an understanding of the history here, and it will be histories because you're not all going to agree on what happened and why and when, and that's normal and it's fine. But grief can go hand in hand with that. It's okay for you to share with me how much you loved Reverend Duffy and other ministers. It's also okay to say, hey, ministers have hurt me sometimes. They didn't understand, or they weren't there when I needed them to be. And given our losses of the pandemic, I think the retirement of Reverend Duffy may be impacting you even more deeply than you had expected or anticipated. And our hearts are so tender over the last 2.5 years of COVID. It's just a time that we should take exquisite care of one another. So while caring for our hearts, we'll move into some of the tasks of what transition guru William Bridges calls the neutral zone. Now, some of you are thinking, Margo, could you call it like it is? It's the twilight zone. We're in COVID. We're in a minister change. We don't know what's happening next. The time when a new plan is not yet emerged is the natural experience of feeling worry. And sometimes worry actually goes up a notch and turns into anxiety. So I don't know how many of you have read the Bridges books. He actually wrote them quite a while ago, so it wouldn't surprise me if a fair amount of you don't know them. But he is the guru that would go into different organizations and help them from some massive change through what he calls the neutral zone, the wandering out to a new vision on the other side. So the neutral zone is where you're waiting for that new thing to emerge. Grief lingers, uncertainty can be there, because everyone's waiting for something new to be revealed. So he actually makes it sound rather terrible at first. Just, it's confusing and lonely and worried and disorienting, and those things can be true. But I think, especially in faith community, it can be a time of valuing relationships, caring for one another, and using creativity and taking stock of what really matters. We had the board retreat yesterday, right over here, and we talked a lot about creativity, bringing our best pieces, what our talents and what we do well, and putting that together with other people's talents, and to be creative and think about things, possibly in a new way. I think Bridges really secretly loves that messy neutral zone, and therefore he comes up with all sorts of illustrative stories. And he especially uses the story of the Israelites in the desert. The end of something, slavery in Egypt, a 40-year neutral zone of wandering around in the desert. I promise you will not be left without your questions answered for 40 years. But I do want to plunge into that story for a little bit. So I'm wondering if you have 3 questions. Are we going to have to listen to the Hebrew Bible every Sunday that Margo is in the pulpit? There's a lot of other secular or sacred texts. Do we really need to go wander in the wilderness for 40 years? And does Margo think she's Moses? So the short answers to those questions is no. I love the Hebrew Bible. I think there's incredible wisdom there. Secondly, wandering is useful, and that's why we're talking about it. And third, if I start to act like the prophet who has a lot of answers, our process has gone awry. This is about you and your wisdom and your creativity. I'm here to shape it and support it, but this is your process. So, of course, in the Israelite story, they leave slavery, they leave Egypt, they wade into the water with the sea opening and then eventually closing behind them. That's the event. They've left. And they have been heard stories, there will be a promised land. But after they get across the waters, it's just the desert. It's the wilderness. There is no milk and honey. It's a wide and terrifying wilderness that goes on for 40 years, which means, of course, the elders never see the promised land. The 40 years of wandering is described by the Unitarian Universalist minister Kathleen Mateague. I used her chalice lighting words this morning. The Israelites were not carried along on a surge of vindicated faith, but stumbled forward with paralyzing doubts. And instead of enjoying sweet unity and their freedom, After all they had been through, they were torn by bickering and division. They walked in relentless uncertainty and discomfort and fell asleep on the hard ground to wake feeling ashamed of dreaming of the life they had left behind. So you aren't the wandering Israelites, but each of us knows a little bit about what it means to be lost in the wilderness. We have all been there at one point or another, with some terrible disappointment or loss or worry. It suddenly feels pathless and we can feel very alone. We know how it feels to try to move out of that by taking a leap of faith towards some place we want to be. A community, a relationship, a new way of experiencing health, or a location. And right now, the changes and challenges belong to UUFB. A great deal of what's known and familiar falls behind. But what we hope for is a little beyond the horizon. So what Bridges and Kathleen Mateague are going to tell you is that the neutral zone, or the twilight zone, it's uncomfortable, but it's necessary. And perhaps Reverend Mateague's words best fit your situation, the situation here today. The passages through the land of in-between are scary and uncomfortable, and the desert is a place we would rather barrel through as quickly as possible toward the welcoming ground of our destination. But our time in the desert is a passage of the heart, not a physical journey of the body. And it's not in our power to speed it up. The inner desert has something to offer. It's hard to fight the impulse to get out of the place of passage as quickly as possible, but each day we spend there, no matter how uncomfortable, is a precious day in our lives. Can we just slow down and look? So, of course, the Israelites left the desert. They crossed over into the life-giving waters of the Jordan. And maybe it opened up and cleansed them. Maybe something else was able to come forward. It sharpened their awareness, softened their hearts, so they could receive more gifts. So together, you and I will work on the questions of the journey, and my role is to share and guide it. I want to spend just a few minutes talking about what this is going to look like. And if you read the newsletter, but maybe not, might still be in your inbox, these are in there, but I want to talk about them in a little more depth. So claiming and honoring your past includes your sturdy foundation, starting so many years ago and building from a small but steady and committed group. Honoring those original founders. And I hear there are only 2 original founders left. So honoring those still with us and those who have passed on. And how all of you, the founders started it, but how all of you eventually picked up that mission and that vision and moved it forward to 140 members. When I look at your growth rate in that few amount of years, it's incredible. And the adjustments that must have been made during that time. And you're going to continue to grow in the future. I can already see this. And for those of you who are saying, is she going to make us do that sticky note thing again? Well, yes and no. Yes, I am going to make you do it again. But we're going to do it in a slightly different way. It's going to be more about how those events changed you. And I find as I get older, as if I add on 5 years and 10 years and 15 years, I sometimes look at back events and I see them a little bit differently. And so your sticky note might be similar to what you did before, but it might have something different in it, or it might have a postscript. I felt that way then, but I feel this way now. So by illuminating your identity and your strengths and your challenges, we're going to look at any roadblocks that might be in the way before calling another minister and how to solve those. So a new vision or mission might emerge. Or perhaps it will just be a mindful and joyful reaffirming of the present ones. I have the mission and vision statement taped in large letters, taped to the back of my filing cabinet, so you can't see it if you just walk by the office. But I look at it all the time. And it's an amazing, it's more than a document. It is a living roadmap. So you might find that you're just joyfully reaffirming it in a mindful way. We're also going to be thinking about how to bring familiar families back here to UUFB and how to bring in and invite some new ones, because families are looking for a place like this for their kids and for other parents who share their values. Beth and I will be doing a service on that on September 18th. About how we communicate those values and celebrate them. And also, we need to think about how to be in touch with members who are still very much a part of UUFB, but do not feel safe in coming on Sunday mornings, who may or may not be on our live stream. But how do we find out? How are those people doing? What's up with them? Can they come back, maybe not to a Sunday morning, but maybe a small group activity in someone's backyard? How can we serve them? We'll also look at leadership. And I know because of COVID that volunteerism is down everywhere. There are leadership positions here that desperately need to be filled. I know you had a very difficult time filling board positions. People want to bring back circle suppers, but they're just like, who's going to coordinate that? How are we going to do that safely? Your hearts and minds are so full of things you want to do, but we need volunteers to bring those to fruition. And maybe you can't serve on a committee, but maybe you could pick up a certain task that's very time limited. Hey, I can do this thing for 4 months. So I'll be asking you to think about that as well. Renewing connections with the Unitarian Universalist Association. This always feels like a slippery slope to me because I never know what your relationship is with them before I get here. But let me just tell you, your regional congregational life representative is Sarah Schur. And Sarah Schur and I know one another, although we're not social friends, but we seem to connect whenever we're at professional meetings. And I think we were both social workers before we were ministers. And when she found out I was coming to Bozeman, she pulled me aside at the minister meeting in Portland, where we were physically there. She was as excited about this as Reverend Lois. She said, you are a great match and you're going to do good work together. And I want you to know that she sees you as an incredibly healthy and committed congregation that love and care for one another, and that also grow Unitarian Universalism here in Bozeman. She had nothing but wonderful things to say. So I would say your connection with the UUA is excellent, but maybe we can just illuminate it a little more. We're also going to renew, the UUA is really asking congregations to engage deeply in anti-racism and anti-oppression work. And really in 3 ways. In the heart, the more anti-racism work I do, the more I discover those places in my heart where I hold really misrepresentations that I don't even know I have. So the more I explore, the more my heart gets softened, and then the more I want to know. Also, to look at that in our congregations. So any so that we can serve the needs of many, many people from different walks of life. And then, of course, legislatively as well, to protect the rights of everyone. I will be leaving a week from today for the interim ministry training, which is in Montgomery, Alabama. We will be there for 5 days. Part of what we will take in there is the Legacy Project. We will go in and see Brian Stevenson's work of the 4,400 African Americans who had been lynched between the Civil War and today, and the monument and their stories. So that training is purposely in Montgomery, Alabama, because they want us to be horrified and moved and transformed and to speak from personal experience. I'm excited, and I will bring back what I learned. I will also bring back some beautiful colored photography of what I see. Oh no, lost my pages. That's okay. The last one, I'm already on the last one. So preparing for your new called minister, engaging in that future with anticipation and excitement. That's preparation of the heart work as well, what you hope for in a new settled minister. And because Bozeman, UUFB is an amazing place to be, you will get another called minister. I am confident. So your part in all of this, very soon I'll be asking you to come talk to me, either in one-on-one meetings, or obviously if it's you and your spouse, it would be 2 people coming in and talking with me. There will also be some small groups that I hope, like a cottage meeting. It might be 4 to 5 people, and I'll have some questions for you. I hope to hold those outside if we can, so that people who have concerns about feeling safer will have that option of being outside. There'll be grief, there'll be joy. Hopefully there will be humor and humility as we go through all of this. After I have a chance to meet with as many people as want to meet with me, we'll have a timeline for what we're going to do for the rest of the year. And the sticky note project will, it'll be here somewhere. To be determined. We may try to meet all together at some point. That is a bit unknown right now. But your immediate task is to know that whatever your feelings are, they're normal. And if worry, if discomfort starts to turn to worry and starts to turn to anxiety, just know if that's pulling on you, you're not alone in this. You're a faith community, and we're going to journey together into the wilderness. Well, we're already in the wilderness, but we will come out the other side with the love and care of each other. Blessed be.